Hi, those of you who stayed, thank you. There's nobody here. All right. Well, got a nice echo out of this thing too. Okay, so I thought it might be interesting if I talked a little bit about what I did. Well, not actually last week, it was the week before last. When I wrote this, it was last week, during a game programming challenge. Wherein the challenge is to write a game during the week. I did it by myself, but you don't have to do it by yourself. You can enter as part of a team, but I've done it about 9 times now, and 3 of those times I did it in a team, and the rest I did by myself. But the point is to write a game pretty much from scratch. You can use some libraries that already exist and some artwork if you're allowed to use the artwork. If you have permission to use the artwork, you can use that as well. As I say, I've done this 9 times. I had some personal goals this time then. I had some specific technologies that I wanted to try out. Most importantly, I wanted to try out doing the game level design using Inkscape and SVG. For the last few challenges, I've used Python and Piglet to do the actual kind of guts of the game programming. And I wanted to try out a few extra libraries. There's a particle engine library called Lepton, and there's an SVG rendering library called Squirtle. And the same people who wrote Squirtle have another library called, or kind of a game or project skeleton called Foreground, which apparently those two are Pokemon references, but I don't actually know anything about Pokemon, so I'll take their word for it. The game audience, as has been the case a couple of times, is my daughter, who's almost 6 years old, and I wanted to write a platformer. One of my gripes with modern kind of console games is that the platformer games are actually really hard. Some of the really fun-looking ones, like the Lego ones, they look really fun, and she has a bit of fun playing them, but they're really hard. So I wanted to write something that was a lot easier for her to play. Okay, so the challenge starts for me on Sunday morning. It actually runs from kind of 00 UTC one Sunday to 00 UTC the next day, just to avoid any gripes about time zones, because it's an international challenge. But for me, it's a quite reasonable 10 a.m. in the morning is the start time. And I started it by announcing the winning theme, a voting process amongst all the competitors or the challengers to determine what the theme is. So I announced the theme, and I sit on IRC for a little while and talk to people about game ideas. One of the nice things about the challenge is that over the last 9 times it's run, there's been quite a community has built up around it. So the IRC channel is quite strong, and there's a message board online and a bunch of other stuff. I then proceeded to go about my normal daily life on Sunday, and whilst thinking about the game and what I might do. And then by the end of the day, I had a local source repository which proudly had version 2 of my game checked in. Version 1 was basically the skeleton and not much else checked in, but version 2 had a bunch of work. So one of the things I had to do, the Squirtle, it's geared very much towards taking a single SVG file and rendering the contents of that file as is. I needed to modify it so that it would handle rendering layers of SVG. So in Inkscape, I created my levels using layers, and I'll show you what that means in a little bit. But so I had to modify Squirtle to do that, and also to save off path information because I wanted to use it for collision detection. But anyway, that took a couple of hours, and by the end of all that, I actually had a basic game going. And so what I'll do now is, hopefully, be able to, sorry, bear with me. I'll show you what I had at the end of that 2 hours, at the end of Sunday as version 2. There's a bit of a bug in this version, version 2, such that the character doesn't appear sometimes. So this is actually placeholder art from an earlier game that I'd written for my daughter based on the Meg and Mog series of books. So I drew up, it's my version of Meg. Anyway, the big eye thing's kind of disturbing. That was me mucking around, try to ignore that. Anyway, so basic platformer stuff. So I can jump up onto platforms and run into them. And I've got, some parallax stuff going in there. This is just loading up out of an Inkscape file directly, and I'll show you what that looks like in a second. One of the things to note here is I gave this straight away to my daughter and said, have a play and see what you think. And the first thing she did was try to jump up onto the platform, and she just kept jumping into it. So you'll notice in future versions, I made the platforms so you could jump through them. Anyway, so play testing. That really emphasises a couple of things about writing a game in a week. The first thing is that you should have something within the first day. You should have something that's playable, something that ultimately could be submitted as your game, even though there wasn't really much there, but something that is playable that represents kind of the core mechanic of your game should be implemented within the first day. The reason being that if you can't express that in code in a day, then you're trying to do way too much for a 1 week challenge. And the other thing is that you should get feedback from your audience and feed that into your game design as well. So anyway, this is what very zoomed out, this is what the Inkscape file looks like for level 1. And I'll zoom into it in bits and pieces in a little bit. But yeah, that's the whole thing. And the actual Inkscape document, which is that kind of rectangle around the landscape there, actually this is the first version of level 1. This isn't even, oh no, sorry, this is the final version. That's 22,000 pixels long, I think, something like that anyway. The really nice thing is it's all vector graphics, so that they're not actual pixels that need to be stored anywhere, which is the wonderful thing about your vector art. Anyway, so I was talking about layers. So there's actually 7 layers in there. Unfortunately, when I took that screenshot, you can't see some of them because I forgot to turn them all on. There's 2 layers that are hidden. The first layer is kind of the distance, so the sky. Actually, I call it sky. That's a typo. Then there's the distance layer, which is kind of the mountains off in the distance. So the first level of parallax, and then the second level of parallax for your midfield sort of layer. And then in the foreground, I actually have 2 layers, and I call them background and foreground, just to be confusing. So this is the plane that the player is actually on. So there's a background layer, and this stuff appears behind the character. And then there's a foreground layer, which appears in front of the character. So they're drawn in that order. The actual stuff that the character interacts with, so the ground and anything that blocks the character, is present in the foreground layer. That's why the ground appears there. The character doesn't always interact with things in the foreground. So, for example, you can see the branch of the tree here, the green bit. That's in the foreground, but the character doesn't interact with it. And the way I determine this special property is in Inkscape, I can edit labels on objects. And so I actually just mark some things as ground in the label and some things as ledge, which I'll get to. There's another layer on top of that, which is called game. And this has all of the game triggers in it. So the little yellow box with the C, that's a pickup. That's a coin in kind of platform gaming parlance. It just gives you some points. The red line is a path that a baddie will follow. The blue shading, you might notice that everything got blue, is actually one single rectangle that encompasses the entire playing area. So the player is clipped to that playing area and can't fall outside it, which is very useful for stopping things like the player falling outside of your game. The orange box is actually interesting. It's a tutorial trigger. So when the player intersects that tutorial trigger, I pop up a little message if they're in tutorial mode. And I can show you what that looks like. And then on top of that, I have another layer, which is the seventh layer, which is the ideas layer, which is discarded when I parse the SVG file. And it's purely there for me to throw around ideas to kind of mark things up with where I haven't implemented something. I can say, I'm going to put a baddie here, or here I've got the actual player character image so that I know what scale the player is relative to the other artwork that I'm creating. So that's the ideas layer. So the ideas stuff, the stuff you can see above and kind of around the level document, that's all in the ideas layer. And so there's some stuff in there like, this is pretty much the first thing that I created when I created the level, was just kind of a mock-up of how I thought the play would go through the level. And the way I came up with this was I looked at Super Mario Level 1, World 1, and kind of looked at the timing of when the first baddie appeared, and when the first coin appeared, and when the first power-up appeared, and kind of and when the challenges were, because that's pretty much a masterpiece of level design. So I kind of used that for where my cues would be as well. And there's some other incidental artwork here, like the stars and the heart and the bunny rabbit that never made it into the final game, and the feathers, me mucking around with feathers, and just some other ideas. So down at the right at the start, I'll show you kind of a detail of the start there. Again, you can see I've got some, in the ideas layer, I've got information about scale. So I've got the screen width going up to 1024 or 1600 pixels, and then height, showing how high I expect the player to be able to jump. A general rule of thumb with platforming games is the character should be about 1/6 of the screen high. And so I've kind of tried to scale things so that the character is that high relative to everything else. Actually broke that in the version that I submitted as part of the challenge, and I've had one bit of feedback already where somebody's complained that they couldn't see where they were jumping or something because the scale wasn't right. And I'll actually be fixing that up so that the scale is back to what it should have been. Okay, so that's Sunday. That was in 4 hours work, and that included me modifying the library to do the loading of SVG the way I wanted it to do. If it was already doing that, which it does now, getting that version of the game going would have been an hour, maybe. And I'll actually be giving a tutorial at LCA in an hour and a half, how to write a game. So it'll be kind of building on that. So version 12, run out of fingers. I got my basic first character art, and I've mucked around with Lepton a little bit to get some particle effects. A bit of tweaking of Squirtle because it wasn't quite doing what I wanted to do. I've introduced baddies and player health and shooting and pick up and score. So I'm just adding features that you would find in this sort of game slowly and iteratively. This was about 8 hours work, mostly because I was stuffing around with Squirtle because it's a really nice particle engine, but you need to think a little bit differently about how, because it's implemented as a C library, you're basically providing configuration to it to tell it how to do things with particles. And so I had to think differently about how I wanted to do things, and I had to experiment, and it took a little while. It was still fun, but it took a little while to get what I wanted to get going. So let's just pop up. I'm just going to put this down. Hopefully it doesn't go bang. So this is now the end of Monday, and you can see I've got my particle effects, and I've got my new character art, and I've got score and health and all that jazz. and I still bump into here, so I haven't fixed that yet, but I'll get to that. And I've got my baddie, and I can shoot my baddie. And if I hit the baddie, then I lose health. Bang, bang. And it's actually now printing out into the console, you're dead. And you know, I can shoot baddies. I can't shoot left, but that's a minor thing. And I've got a timer thing. Yes, there's game over. I'm dead. So that's the end of Monday. So you can see it's already kind of starting to really form an actual game. Okay, Monday. Tuesday we went to Science Works. That's Abby. Help us, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're our only hope. Anyway, so yes, the Star Wars exhibit, that took up pretty much the entire day. And it's a lot of fun. Go and see it. Anyway. And after we got home from that, I just kind of faffed around doing some more design in level 1, doing some more props. But also, again, with this feedback from Abby, I introduced the ledge ground type. I won't jump in because it's a bit of a pain actually to jump into to do the demo, so I'll demo it in the next one instead. Right, so Tuesday was a short day. Wednesday, again, was another full day. I actually took the week off, but I didn't work on this stuff full time. I kind of did a few hours during the day and a few hours in the evening, and kind of lazed about reading books and stuff for the rest of the time. I finished off the character art. I tweaked the character a little bit. You can see the head kind of changed a little bit. I don't know if you've noticed the difference. But I also did all the animation for the character, which was a lot of fun. And again, all in Inkscape, and it was actually kind of easy to just do the various stages of the animation in Inkscape and then save them off as PNGs. And then I wrote a simple little thing to basically play those. And the same module, same like kind of Python module, if I run it, it invokes itself as an editor, so I can kind of position the sprites for the animation to figure out what their offsets are and all that sort of stuff. I ended up with a really nice little smooth walking animation. But then I learned something about animation. This was the animation support and experiment bit, in that if you actually do a full kind of almost, if you do a full animation where the character is actually moving differently, because as you're walking, you're actually moving at different speeds. If you actually build that into a game, it really sucks, because the screen is kind of jumping along. So I ended up ditching the variable movement part, and you'll actually see when I run it that the screen moves at a constant speed with the animation kind of playing. And that's how games work, and now I know why. The other thing I added was if you get damaged, you get invulnerable for a little while, so you don't die just bam. Added animals, because the whole idea of the game is you're healing the baddies, because they're the friends of the forest who have been turned into baddies, and you're healing them and they fly away. And so I added the bird and the rabbit. The rabbit didn't make it into the final game, but the bird did. There's a famous guy, Edward Muybridge, who right around this, when kind of photography really started, he was responsible for doing a whole bunch of motion capture of people and animals. And the really nice thing is this stuff's all out in the public domain now, and there's tons of it on the internet. There's YouTube videos of his work and everything. And it's really good because you just kind of trace around stuff, so that's where I got my bird animation from. And yuck pools. Yuck pools are cool. So let's just have a quick look at that. Yeah, Muybridge is good. If you want to really kind of get a look at how people walk or how they run or whatever, then yeah, good value. Wrong one. Jumping to 23. Oh, these, by the way, these are all just checkouts from my Bazaar repository for the version that I checked in at the end of the day. So no, I'm just running those. Okay, so you can see some of the art that I added on Tuesday there, and we've got the walking animation. And you can jump up through the ledges and stuff, and you can shoot both ways, and you know, the birds flap away. Well, they don't flap away yet, but they will. And there's a little puff when you save them and stuff, and it's all cute. Oh, and there's the bad stuff, the yuck pool, and another yuck pool. And if I jump over here far enough, you can see I also added another tree with a bit of a skill challenge here where you have to jump across the gap. And so on. So it's, you know, more stuff being added, as is, you know, the point. At this point, that would be something, actually, not necessarily that point, at the previous point, it would be something that I could have happily submitted to the challenge as, you know, the end product of my efforts for the week. And I think actually at that point I had uploaded, just in case I didn't get around to uploading another one, I uploaded my final entry using that code, and then, you know, continued to work on it. So let's just jump back into here. So, you know, just adding more stuff. Thursday, another full day, well, as I say, full day, 6 to 8 hours or so of work. I actually changed the way that I was doing kind of scene management. I switched to a different library. It gave me a bunch of extra stuff like an easy way of generating menus and a few other things. So that was nice. I added the tutorial mode, which I talked about before. I'll show you. It's kind of neat. And I added a power up. So the idea with most of these games is, you know, you pick up new ways to shoot or jump or whatever. And so I added that. And I added the first level boss. So that would be 31. I hope. So here's, you know, the front level menu, Abby's Grand Adventure, with a little FPS counter there. It's really, really low because there's nothing going on. It's not really, really low because the performance sucks. It's just there's nothing for it to do. So if I play the level with the help, you see now I've got, there's actually a trigger right at the spawn so that you immediately get help, you know, press these buttons to move around. And then I go on a bit further and I say, collect these things for points. And press, you know, obviously I tweaked the positioning of this stuff later on. But, you know, so there's little bits of help. I also spaced things out a little bit so that you didn't get a baddie straight away. And don't let the spiky things touch you. Cast a spell with shift. Shift? Okay, and I made the birds flap away this time now. And you can see there the new first level spell. And if I stay out of the stuff, yes. Oh, and the yuck pools have got bubbles now instead of the stupid thing. Stay out of the bad stuff. Sorry, doing this left-handed doesn't really work. Okay, sorry? Not yet. We'll get to that. Okay, so, okay, and the Grand Phoenix, there's a story about the Grand Phoenix has been sent from the land by the Queen Baddie. Abby made all this stuff, that was great. Anyway, so you pick up the Grand Phoenix feather and you get the power up, which is the Zappy Spell. Oh, and I don't know if you can see there, but there's actual stars now. It used to just be little puff things, but the pickups and the zap is with stars now. As you can see the stars there. Yeah, kinda. Anyway, so that's, you know, more stuff. It starts to feel like an actual game, which is cool. So that was Thursday, I think. Where are we? So Thursday. Friday, version 2A. I don't think so. I forgot to edit that. It's like version 38, I think now. So, I actually did some art up for the Grand Phoenix. I totally stole it from this online tutorial about how to draw a phoenix. So when I say stole, it was actually, you know, there's a guy did a blog page about how to draw a phoenix, so I followed it. It came up pretty good, I think. I also mocked up level 2 and 3 because the time is starting to run out and I wanted to have 3 levels to submit, so I kind of mocked those up. Added some stuff, some more gamey stuff like when you hit the end of the level, it gives you a little score tally, so it adds your time bonus on and stuff like that. Because because there's people who play this stuff to try and get the highest score, so it's, you know, kind of good fun. And actually storing off the high score and having mutable levels, so having it so that Squirtle could actually remove elements from the SVG. So I can actually mark things, not only just the label, but I can change the ID of the thing in the SVG file and then remove it from the file, or move it around for that matter. Transform it, and actually handle the end of the game. Do I need to? I won't show you that because I'll move on. You'll see all of that stuff in the next version that I show you anyway. So version 45, I spent the day at a friend of Abby's. It was his birthday party, so I got maybe 3 or 4 hours work done on Saturday. I added a new second level spell, which was a big thing, because I wanted kind of 2 levels of power up. Added some stuff to initially handle people who had different size screens to mine. And I added sound effects and music. And also the baddies, some of the baddies can shoot back, and there's the baddie queen in there now. Okay, so I didn't compose the music myself. I found it on Jamendo, which is a Creative Commons music site. And the sound effects I generated using this Neato program that generates kind of, you know, 8-bit old school sound effects. You press buttons and drag, you know, delays and pitch and what are those? Attack and release and all those sorts of things, to sine and square waves and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, so you can generate sound effects. So I added some of those. So we'll see if we can get that working. Okay, so this is 45. Okay, so you can see the Grand Phoenix thing. Still a bit of iffiness with the menu layout, but I'll work on that. Okay, so I wanted to I've shown you the thing with help. So I've got level 2 and level 3, and I've also got, for development, I've got a level 999, which is my kind of test level. It's a very small thing that I can just kind of chuck triggers into to test them out, or chuck baddies into to test them out. I've got the high score page. Oh, except this version has a bug. It's drawing black on black. Let's go to level 2, actually. I'll show you level 2. So there's music, and they shoot. And I'm doing this one-handed. Great. Oh, I don't know if you saw that, but yeah, the level 2 spell kind of bounces now. Anyway, I'll stop there. Right. Really, terrible doing this one-handed. All right, so that was Saturday. So this is the day before submission day. So of course, Sunday, Father's Day. So I was forced to stay in bed and eat breakfast. It was terrible. Even still, I managed to, just before the deadline at 10 a.m., I managed to mock up a little story page, just to kind of give you an idea of what on earth is going on, and added window mode. This is really important because I've only tested it on one computer at this point, and if the game somehow goes awry and locks up in some way, you won't be able to kill it if it's in full screen. So I always ship my games in windowed mode with an option to switch to full screen once the person knows it's not going to kill their computer. Because PyWeek, the challenge generates something in the order of 50 games, which you're encouraged to play all of them in the next 2 weeks, to rate them, to judge them, to kind of peer judge them. And if you have to reboot your computer after every one, you kind of don't get through many. So yes, I did a couple of last-minute bug fixes, and I submitted it. And then after the deadline, I submitted another bug fix, as I found that there was I think the story screen explicitly said press space to go back to the menu, only I forgot to handle the space bar. So one guy said, oh, it didn't work, I had to reboot my computer. I was like, you just had to press escape, but anyway. And of course, I'm the Pi Week admin, so I had to do a bunch of that stuff as well. Fortunately, these days, we've got a very, very civilized way of submitting games. Back in the good old days, it used to be you had 7 days, and at the end of the 7 days, you submit your game, and then the judging starts. After the server died, about Pi Week 3 or 4, being completely overloaded with everybody uploading their 20 megabyte games at the same time, I instigated a thing about where you could upload an MD5 hash, and then you had 24 hours to upload the game that matched the hash. That was way too complicated. Seriously, people generating MD5 hashes that had no relevance whatsoever to the actual game they were submitting and fun things like that. So these days, it's just at the end of the 7 weeks, there's another 24 hours where you have to upload your game sometime during that time. And if you don't get it in by the end of that 24 hours, you miss out. There's absolutely zero leniency, you've got 24 hours. And then of course there's people who ask, so are we allowed to do some more game development during that time? It's like, well, you're not supposed to. and we leave it at that. So I might just, let me just see, because you might find this interesting. Mirroring. Oh, actually, I don't need to mirror it for this. Oh, well, I'll do it anyway. Okay, so this is the final version that I submitted. So you can see I got the menu kind of lined up properly, and I've got the little game story screen. Very, very simple, very easy to read. Oh, and you can see the Queen Baddie over there, kinda. Let me just, oops. Oh, I've got mouse grabbing on, so, oh, actually, let me just, I fixed that. Oh, that's right, it's, if I go, game story, yeah, it's always going to do that. That's a shame. Anywho, so, yeah, the game story and a couple of bug fixes, so there's not much else interesting going on there. I also added this thing at the end of the game so that when you actually defeat the Queen Baddie, which I would actually have to play the whole level, so I won't put you through that. You get to the end and you defeat her and she drops the Grand Phoenix's final feather and you grab the feather and it goes poof and there's the Grand Phoenix appears and says, thank you for saving me. And then it says the end and it's great. Just to kind of, round things off a little bit. So that's Sunday. Now, I've already done a fair bit of work in cleaning up the code because at the end of the week you end up with some code that's not so pretty in places. And so I've already cleaned up a bunch of the code. I'm going to take the work that I've done with the SVG layers and actually integrate them into the Cocos game library so that that's easily available to anyone, and that's in fact then going to form the basis of my LCA talk, so I'd better get moving on that. Although that's in January, it's a heap of time. And then, of course, the modifications I've made to Squirtle, I'll be feeding those back to the author of Squirtle as well, so they'll be happy too. I think the last thing I'll try and do, see if this works on the small screen. Well, it's not that small actually. See if I can fire up Inkscape just to give you an idea of inside Inkscape some of the cool stuff we can do in there. I mean, I've already kind of shown you the layering, and I'll need to turn mirroring on. Turn on mirroring. Okay, so data. How am I doing for time, by the way? Okay. Oh, so that's the Queen Baddie. You didn't get to see her in the game. The head is completely ripped off from the Disney Queen, Snow White. Yeah, yeah. We have the poster right outside my study, so it was like, oh, I'll use that. Maleficent. She's not called that in my game for trademark reasons. Copyright, possibly. So I'll pull up, first thing what I'll do is I'll pull up this one. This is kind of an interesting one. So this file is my file of game sprites. So you can see, I'll zoom in a little bit. Down. So you can see there is my animation poses. So the standing straight forward, which actually doesn't get used in the game, but standing left, standing right, and then walking, starting with the right foot and then the left foot, and then the same thing the other way to get the shading right. The style of the character, I don't know if anybody knows Kiki's flying delivery service, is very much modelled on Kiki, because that's one of Abby's favourite characters. Mine too, but yeah, so, and then, jumping and landing, I didn't end up using the landing, but, and there's a leg, just in case I need an extra leg. This was just a mucking around with a different effect, and I put it on the white. It's actually the white sprite for the effect on the black so I don't lose it. The bunny, which hops, which again you don't get to see, and then the bird, which flaps. That's a boulder. The Queen throws them at you. You don't get to see that. And a couple of other things, including, so there's the Grand Phoenix, which is a, whoa! This is challenging. Okay, so that's the drawing there. And that was actually quite easy with the instructions. That was actually quite easy to draw. I don't think I would ever have got the legs right without the... I have no artistic ability, by the way. All of this stuff is all drawing on reference material. Sorry, the baddie there, that's all me. But everything else, it's all drawing on other stuff. And so that's the image that you get. So I just rasterized that as a PNG and just display that at the end. On the level, I just pop that up and say, thank you for saving me, all that sort of stuff. It's really easy to rasterize stuff in SVG. It's just bam, save. Set the DPI generally is leave it at 90 because it's the DPI that it's used in the document, and you say export and away you go. Go Inkscape, yeah. So that's on the little sprites. Actually, the Queen is in a separate. You might have noticed the Queen wasn't in that sprite sheet because those sprites are just the ones that I rasterized. The Queen I didn't. The Queen is actually rendered using as SVG in the game because that means I can do better transformation. Basically, it scales better than a bitmap does because I end up scaling her right down from about 200% right down as you hit her with your healing magic. Let's load up. This is level 3. I'll just have to pop up. I can't do it. Oh, I can do it this side. Just have to pop up the layer dialog. Hello, layer dialog. Oh, that's right. It's control. Hate that. Oops. So I'll just make the game layer disappear. Okay, so this is level 3 in the castle. You can see I've got little lights, and you basically run along and you jump up the stairs and up these platforms and up the top, and then right up the top is the Queen Baddie, and you defeat her. I've got a starry night and everything. It's all very pretty. Something to note here, one of the things that makes this sort of thing really a lot faster to develop is that I can jump into the SVG, and when it doesn't do that stupid focus thing, one of the problems with working in Inkscape on the Mac is that focus is completely confused. So like you have to double click to do anything. You basically have to double click because it has to focus the window and then focus the thing you're clicking on. It's just a bit of a nightmare. But one of the things is this little box down here, that tells me where the player starts. So if I want to test out the Queen Baddie battle, I can just go up here, drag my player start up there. I can take this other little thing here, which is the power up to give her the full power zap blast, and drop that underneath, so when you spawn you fall through it. I save that, jump in. I haven't tested this, so it might not work. Where am I going? AGA. And I've still got mirroring going on, good. So now I play level 3. Yeah, I broke something. Sorry, can't show you that. Oh, actually, Inkscape changed their format. I depend on some Inkscape specific things, like the layer stuff is actually implemented as Inkscape specific document markup. So I have to cope with that now, and I haven't got around to it, so sorry. But anyway, the point is, when you're developing a game, you want to be able to just quickly jump around and test various things out inside a level to make sure that the gameplay flows properly, and you can just do it. You can just drag stuff around, save it, and away you go, which is really quite neat. Yeah, so the whole experiment with Inkscape as a level design tool, completely happy with that. The one thing that I didn't get to do, which I'm a bit disappointed about, is, let me just go back to, you might notice in the level design here that the ground isn't flat. I'd actually intended to do sloping ground as part of the game, but just never got around to even trying to implement it. I was too busy having fun with other things. So that'll be kind of the next project. I think we'll be doing that. On the other hand, I know that there's people who have taken the geometry out of SVG, loaded out of SVG, and put it straight into one of the 2D physics libraries like Box2D or Chipmunk, and have created games like that with curves and everything in their games. So that's an option as well. The downside of using one of those physics libraries is that the physics model isn't quite... Who's played Little Big Planet? None of you. Okay. Okay, you kids. Who knows what it is? All right. Yeah. So the core idea here is, well, one of the core ideas is that it's actually running inside a physics sandbox. So it's a platforming game, side-scrolling platforming game, but inside a physics sandbox. So you can do all sorts of fun stuff like balancing things and making swings and all that sort of fun stuff. The downside with having it inside a physics sandbox is you have to put in all sorts of hacks, including the actual character that you play in the game has, I think, almost negative weight in order to get behaviour in the game that matches kind of the preconceived ideas of what physics should be like in a platforming game. Cartoon physics, exactly. Whereas, you know, Box2D and Chipmunk, they're there to try and do a more realistic implementation of what a physics model should be. So I might end up just trying to come up with something myself, see how I go. That's way more than all I had to say, so thank you for putting up with my rambling. One of the problems that my daughter had, she's not bored with it yet, but one of the problems she did have was that she couldn't cope with the keyboard controls. She she kept on having to look at the keyboard, and she could really only press one key at a time. She kind of got to the point where she could hold down two at a time, and I mean, it's just a case of practice, but it wasn't really working so well. So what I did was I got her to use the Wiimote. And in fact, even that's not ideal. The Wiimote, in its kind of sideways, old school mode, it's a bit fiddly to hold. So I'm actually looking at getting the PlayStation controller going instead. The nice thing is they're both Bluetooth, and they both just work. So if I can actually just demonstrate this. It's really easy. I've got a bit of a hack here because I had a bit of trouble getting some of the Bluetooth modules compiled under Snow Leopard, the new version of the OS X. They changed a whole bunch of stuff, and there's a few libraries haven't caught up yet. So if I just find Wiimote, discovery error. It's not going to work. Why isn't it going to work? I don't know why it's not working. I'm going to try turning off and on again. Let me quit that and do that. Oh, oops. Hey, there we go. Okay, so this is a stupid little, not stupid, very handy little program. Basically, you can see the buttons light up as I hit them and stuff. But you can just map it to keys. So I actually have it mapped to generate, whoopsie. Hopefully I've got the correct, no, sideways. Okay. So if hopefully one of these levels will work. Yes, good. Oh, sorry, you don't need the sound for this. So if I press I've got two mapped to jump and one mapped to shoot and so on. And so she can actually use this to get much further in the game than she could just by the keyboard control. I'll stop playing at any moment now. One of the other gripes that I got from one of the actual judges, early feedback, was that he didn't like the fact that the platform, couldn't see the platform when it's behind the foliage there. So might change that. And more skill challengey stuff. Sorry?
Being able to hide the platform sometimes, you can put barriers behind bits of trees and make them hard to see.
I think what I might end up doing is just moving the platforms to the front layer and just making them visible. Yeah.
My kids don't know it yet, but they'd like to do game programming.
Yeah.
How should they get started?
Oh, learn how to program first. Yeah. I actually don't know of anything off the top of my head that I could point them at for that. Sorry? Yeah, look, Game Maker or Scratch. To be honest, they're teaching kind of basic programming. The actual programming of games is not that hard. You kind of have to learn how to program first. And not really complex stuff, just the basics of how to tell the computer what you want it to do.
Two suggestions. Squeak, which is a small talk VM specifically designed to stick around with graphic objects and symbols, and there's some great events written in that. The other thing to play around with would be, this is my Ruby bias showing through, there's some Ruby stuff that Why the Lucky Stick did, called Why the Lucky Stick. It may be hard to find at the moment.
I think, yeah, the point is that it's really easy to just get something displayed up on screen, and even beyond that, move it around. And Piglet has a little tutorial on, basically just putting something up on screen and moving it around. I mean, that's really easy. Doing anything more complex, though, you really are starting to get into, you have to be able to express what it is you want the computer to do. And that can be a bit of a challenge. Yeah. So, yeah, shoes is nice, although it kind of vanished at the same time as a few other things. So, yeah. But as I say, there's the Piglet thing. There's a very basic how to write a game thing that I did with Alex, the author of Piglet, at LCA a couple of years ago, which you can find online, and it comes with all the information and there's some basic graphics, and it's writing a very simple Space Invader sort of thing. That sort of stuff's pretty easy. Yeah. Right, time for me to get off.